Joining us is Representative David Schweikert, whose congressional district covers the Northeast Valley. Congressman, what have you heard from your constituents about how you are feeling about the tariffs?
Confusion. We actually have a number of businesses in our Phoenix, Scottsdale area that specialize in doing very technical things, where some of the materials, some of the types of metals and those things only come from other parts of the other side of the world. And they're just sort of shaking, saying, we manufacture stuff, but we need inputs. Now we're not sure what the actual cost of those inputs are. And for a number of us who, absolutely believe China cheats and steals our intellectual property, those things, fine. But the spreading sort of across the world without thinking about the inputs we need, if you're trying to create a manufacturing renaissance in America, we need those inputs. And we haven't actually built the rules and regulations to even get there yet.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing. They're putting in, 5, 6 fabs in North Phoenix. And so there is a foreign company that is going to be manufacturing within the United States. In fact, the biggest business investment in U.S. history. And they have to import some stuff from around the world in order to manufacture here.
Well, a great example, and I actually did hearings on this a year ago and then the year before that. We've learned in the pandemic, we're desperate to move pharmaceutical manufacturing back to the United States. We're heavily reliant on inputs and those things that come from China and India. But in that testimony, it turns out making some of the precursor chemicals, the inputs that go into small molecule drugs and those things, create sometimes tons of highly toxic byproducts. Okay, so you want to move back to the United States drug manufacturing. Are you prepared to license and put together a temperature incineration or ways to mitigate those toxic chemicals? And there's just not enough thinking saying, okay, we want to move this manufacturing back to the United States, but how do we mitigate? How about the toxic substances that are produced? And building the model to deal with everything that comes both from the byproducts and also the inputs.
Representative David Schweikert with us here on the KTAR Newsline. And Congressman, Congress ceded some of its power on controlling tariffs back in the 70s. Do you think you and your colleagues need to gain some of that control back?
Yeah, but it's on so much more than just tariffs. Going actually back to the 50s, Congress, in many ways, when they don't want to do things that are difficult, they hand it to the bureaucracy. They hand it to the regulators. They hand it to the White House. And it's just a complete, avoidance of having to explain to your voters why you actually had to do hard things.
Bottom line, as we talked to Congressman David Schweikert this morning about the tariffs, are you against them? Are you against the scope of them? Where do you stand on all this?
It's the rollout. Okay. What's the ultimate goal? Is this about tax receipts? Is this about revenues? Or is it about a manufacturing or renaissance? If it's the latter, then have we built the rules? Have we built the regulations? Have we built the relationships with countries where we need sort of those raw material inputs? There's a whole series of sequencing, of timing that has to be laid out to actually make that renaissance work. And in many ways, what we've just done is you read the stories now in some of the trade press. Believe it or not, there's actually a trade press talking about saying some of these countries are starting to say, okay, let's just go make a deal with manufacturers in the European Union because the United States is no longer a reliable partner. And my fear is if we don't get disciplined, we may actually hurt the economic revival of the country more than we're helping it.
And also, are you for this growth in revenue? Because in so many ways, these tariffs are taxes. You're a fiscal conservative.
It turns out, once again, it's more complicated. If you get a GDP slowdown, a slowdown in growth, will that be offset by what you're collecting in tariff, taxes, those import revenues? and we just don't have those tables yet. Just last week, when the Federal Reserve actually lowered the estimates of U.S. growth, that was a couple $100 billion a year in less tax receipts in the model because of slower growth. So it's a seesaw. You're trying to find where's the balance. I've given lots and lots of presentations on the math of my belief that other countries use their value-added tax, and then they refund it when they export to us. That becomes a tax arbitrage. What we're doing here is far beyond the offsets on that. So once again, back to the sequencing. Should we actually take on those who exploit their tax systems to take advantage of the United States, or do we take and go to the next level of those which we need to have trade agreements so we're treated fairly? And much of what we're rolling out right now, my fear isn't getting us there.
Representative David Schweikert, his congressional district covers the Northeast Valley, on what he's hearing from his constituents and how he's feeling about these tariffs.
Thanks for watching Arizona's Morning News. Click to watch more from KTAR News and hit the button in the middle to subscribe.